Ever imagine waiting like 4 years for a major business decision? I mean, can you imagine? That's what companies in India used to deal with. Insolvency cases taking forever. Talk about scaring off investors, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a real problem.
Today, we're digging into a case that totally changed the game. Innoventive Industries Ltd versus ICICI Bank. This was back in 2017, Supreme Court showdown. But this wasn't just settling some argument, it like redrew the map for insolvency in India. And guess what? We got our hands on parts of the actual judgment. This was Justice R.F. Nariman, pretty famous in legal circles.
Oh, yeah. Justice Nariman, he's known for being sharp, really cuts through the jargon.
Yeah.
And this case, it's a perfect example, shows the tension between a brand new insolvency code all about speed, and then you've got this older state law trying to, protect businesses.
So it's like this clash of the titans, national law versus state law, with some struggling companies stuck right in the middle. To set the scene, we've got Innoventive Industries. They were into everything, electronics, textiles, the whole 9 yards. But back in 2012, things went south, labor troubles, finances tanked.
Right, and that's never a good mix.
And when a company can't pay its debts, well, things can get messy fast.
That they can. That's where ICICI Bank comes in, major player in Indian banking. They're basically saying, hey, Innoventive owes us big time. Time to figure this out under the new rules. And this was the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016.
Okay, so new code, fresh start. Sounds promising, right?
Right. The idea was to streamline everything, make it faster, more efficient,
But there's always a but, isn't there? Innoventive, they push back, saying, hold on, we're covered by this older law, and this law was specific to Maharashtra, the state where they were based. So now it gets really interesting because this new national code, it was supposed to be the rule book, overriding anything at the state level no matter what.
Exactly. The goal was to make things consistent across the country. Legal clarity, a level playing field. That was the idea.
So the big question for the Supreme Court, would this new insolvency code really overrule those older laws, even if they clash?
It was a big deal, not just for Innoventive, but for how insolvency would work in India going forward.
So we've got this company fighting to survive. A bank wants its money back. And this epic legal battle that could affect the whole Indian economy. And you're telling me the judge in all this was known for being witty? Man, this is way more interesting than law school.
Well, the thing is, Justice Nariman, he doesn't just say who wins and loses. He goes deep on the why. Why India needed to totally revamp how it handles insolvency.
Okay, so what was so bad about the old system that it needed this total reboot? Okay, so Justice Nariman is laying down the law. He's saying why India had to hit like a reset button on this whole insolvency process.
It was a mess, really.
So what was going on?
Imagine this. Company goes belly up, can't pay the bills, but instead of the creditors stepping in, cleaning house, the old management, they get to hang around, sometimes for years.
Seriously, even if they were like clearly failing, they could just keep going, rack up more debt.
Yeah.
That sounds insane. Like, who would invest in that system?
Nobody wanted to touch it. Domestic investors, foreign investors, they all stayed away. Why risk your money when it takes forever to sort things out? And all those valuable assets just stuck in these zombie companies.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So Justice Nariman, he realized this wasn't just about one company's problems. It was about making India attractive to investors again.
Exactly. The whole economy needed a boost.
So it was all about speed and making the process, actually work.
Exactly. Efficiency was key. And that's what the new Insolvency Code did.
How so?
It laid down a strict timeline, 180 days, max. With maybe one extension, 90 days. But that's it.
Wow, that's a huge change.
It was. Suddenly, investors knew what to expect.
Clarity, predictability. Gotta have that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're talking about serious money.
Makes sense. But this case, it wasn't just about setting a new speed limit, right? Didn't Innoventive try to argue that their situation was, like, unique?
They did. They claimed they weren't actually in default.
Oh, really?
It all came down to this restructuring agreement they had with the creditors. Pretty complex stuff.
I bet.
But essentially, Innoventive said the creditors hadn't held up their end of the deal.
Interesting. So what did the court say about that?
Well, the judgment actually acknowledges that this agreement existed.
Okay.
But Justice Nariman, he picks it apart. And he explains why it doesn't fly in this case.
Okay, I'm all ears. How does he shoot down their argument?
He connects it back to the whole purpose of the new code. Efficiency.
Right, that 180-day deadline.
Exactly. Innoventive, they waited until the very last minute to bring up this whole restructuring agreement thing. The court saw right through that. To them, it looked like a delay tactic.
Oh, I see. Trying to stall the whole process.
That's exactly what the new code was designed to prevent.
So it's like trying to change lanes in a race car right when you're about to cross the finish line.
Perfect analogy. And it shows something really important about these legal battles.
What's that?
It's not always just about the arguments themselves. It's about when you play your cards.
So even if Innoventive had a point about the creditors, bringing it up so late made them look, well, kind of desperate.
That's it, exactly. Like they were trying to game the system.
Wow.
And there's another fascinating layer to this.
Okay, tell me more.
This whole thing, it ties into a big trend we're seeing in legal systems worldwide.
A global trend. Now that's interesting. Okay, so we've got this high-stakes legal battle, a race against time,
Right, right.
and now you're saying there's this whole global dimension to the story.
Exactly. Remember how India's new insolvency code was kind of inspired by the UK's system?
Yeah, they borrowed some ideas, right?
Yeah, from their 1986 Insolvency Act. In this case, it shines a light on this trend. Countries looking at what works in other legal systems and saying, hey, maybe we can use that.
Like borrowing a recipe, but maybe swapping out some ingredients?
Exactly. Why reinvent the wheel? Right.
But didn't Justice Narriman point out there can be problems with that?
He did. Because what works great in one country might not be the right fit somewhere else.
Makes sense. So what works in the UK with their history and all that
Right, their business environment?
might not be a perfect match for India.
Not necessarily. They've got their own unique challenges, right?
So it's this balance, isn't it? How do you take these global best practices but still make sure they work locally?
Absolutely. And Innoventive Industries, they were right in the middle of it all.
Their story really shows how important this is.
Because the law, it's not just some abstract thing. It has real consequences for businesses, for people's jobs, for the whole economy.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, there was that one part of the restructuring agreement. You called it a real kicker. What was it that finally convinced the court?
Oh, right. That clause where Innoventive agreed their obligations were, and I'm quoting here, direct, unconditional, and general obligations of the borrower.
Okay, in plain English, what'd that mean?
Basically, no matter what the creditors did, Innoventive still had to pay up.
Even if they had a legitimate gripe about the creditors not keeping their end of the bargain.
Even then, yep, that was a game changer for the court.
Wow. Tough break for Innoventive. But I can see why the court ruled that way.
Yeah, it was all about protecting the process, showing that the new code, it aims to be fair, but it also has to work efficiently. No exceptions.
Especially with something as important as insolvency, right?
Exactly. The stakes are too high.
You know, this whole case really shows how connected everything is. A company struggling, a country's legal system, global investment.
It's all intertwined.
Really makes you think.
It does, and it brings us back to that question we were discussing.
About adapting legal systems.
Exactly. How do we make sure they're serving their own countries? That's something to think about, even outside the courtroom.
Well said. And there you have it, folks. We've explored the ins and outs of Innoventive Industries, from a company fighting for survival to this landmark Supreme Court decision that changed how insolvency works in India and sparked debate around the world. It just goes to show the law might seem rigid, but it's always evolving.
Always adapting to new realities.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Hope it sparked some curiosity out there. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and as always, keep diving deep.